In the twilight of the morning of December 1st, a heavy, damp silence had fallen over the gray zone near Vuhledar, south of Donetsk. The air carried the electrically charged feeling of the approaching storm and the smell of gunpowder left over from the previous day's clashes. This seemingly ordinary morning abruptly ended with the opening of an operational umbrella over a special target that Russian intelligence services had been monitoring for days. The target was a group of foreign mercenaries, identified as having been brought to the region by Ukraine and understood to be experienced. These elements were identified in an old-school building and its surroundings, with Western-style communication equipment and 2 armored vehicles. Russian reconnaissance elements, particularly Orlan-10 unmanned aerial vehicles and signal intelligence (SIGINT) units, meticulously track the group's movements and communication patterns for 48 hours. Beyond standard Ukrainian military terminology, radio conversations in a mix of English and Polish confirmed that this was not an ordinary infantry unit. The coordinates have been finalized and transferred to the relevant units of the Russian Ministry of Defense. The decision was made to physically eliminate this foreign element from the region. At 6 a.m., the classic and deadly symphony of Russian artillery began. The first salvo was fired by 2 S-19 MESTAS self-propelled howitzers whose positions had been precisely calculated in advance. 152mm high explosive shells began to pound the target area and potential escape corridors. This fire was a standard preparatory fire designed to draw the enemy into protected areas and confuse their sensors, in addition to causing destruction. The mercenary group, as expected, retreated to the school building's basement and the surrounding fortifications. However, the real devastation came in the second wave. The TOS-1A Solnta-Zepyok Sunstorm flamethrower systems have been activated. Thermobaric warhead missiles were directed at the estimated coordinates where the enemy was sheltering. The explosions not only caused physical destruction but also had an impact that instantly consumed oxygen over a wide area and created internal pressure waves. According to eyewitnesses and Russian soldiers who subsequently reached the area, no signs of organized resistance were observed in the target region following this attack. As the dust cloud from the artillery bombardment was still settling, Russian mechanized units began their advance. T-90M Proriv tanks and BTR-82A armored personnel carriers quickly encircled the target area, protecting the infantry. The speed of the operation left no opportunity for the shocked defenders to resist. Russian infantry, advancing behind the protection of armored vehicles, began systematically clearing the building and the surrounding trench lines. Close combat ended quickly. One of the 2 Western-made armored vehicles held by the mercenary group was destroyed by a Russian anti-tank guided missile, ATGM. Russian infantry teams entering the building encountered resistance in the basement and rooms on the upper floor. The clashes were intense but short-lived. Russian soldiers had both numerical and initiative superiority. Some of the foreign fighters on the Ukrainian side were considered armed enemies on the battlefield, even though they were not wearing uniforms. In the final stage of the operation, Russian engineering units entered the area and conducted mine and explosive sweeps. The seized documents, communication devices, and weapons were collected. Materials with intelligence value were transferred to the relevant units. According to military analysts, the most critical outcome of this operation was Ukraine's loss of a special tactical group composed of experienced foreign fighters. The training and logistics of such elements are expensive and time-consuming, and their presence in the region represented a significant force multiplier for Kyiv. On the same day, similar operational activities were observed on other front lines in Donbas. Near Horlivka, a Ukrainian artillery battery was silenced by Russian artillery and drone (UAV) coordination. In the direction of Avdiivka, a command center targeted by Russian Special Forces elements was struck by an Iskander-M ballistic missile. Additionally, in the Zaporizhzhia region, Russian aviation's Su-25 SM-3 attack aircraft successfully intercepted Ukrainian supply convoys. These coordinated attacks demonstrated that Russian forces maintained the initiative across a wide front line and operated an effective intelligence strike cycle against both local and foreign elements in Ukraine. The operation was not announced by the Russian Ministry of Defense in a special statement, but details were leaked to the public through various military blogs and channels from the front lines. Experts say that these types of targeted destruction operations have a deeper impact on the morale and professional fighting capacity of the Ukrainian army than conventional infantry combat. Russia's superiority in electronic warfare, unmanned aerial systems, and sniping is considered to have made such precise operations possible. The Ukrainian side, however, did not provide official confirmation or comment on this specific incident, but generally acknowledged the intensity of the fighting in the region. A new story emerged with the latest Russian drone attack. How could this surprise attack on NATO's armored vehicles happen this time? Finland quietly watched the destruction of NATO-supplied armored vehicles used by the Ukrainian army. Ukraine launched a counter-offensive to regain control of the Belovodsk settlement, which was being cleared at the time by Russia's 83rd Air Assault Brigade. To overcome the Russian defenses in the area, they sent a column of armored assault vehicles. This convoy included Turkish Kirpi vehicles, known for their mine protection capabilities, American-made Strykers, iconic Western Humvees, and even Soviet-era BTR-80s. Pushing back Russian forces from the front line was the only goal that drove everyone to mobilize. However, preparations made in the war room are rarely as perfect as the reality on the battlefield. From the viral images, it was clear how the convoy was advancing in a manner that could be described as courageous or perhaps reckless. They seemed to be facing Russian forces without fully understanding the topography or the risks from above. Without drones in the air, a conflict in modern warfare is practically impossible. After Russia's KVN attack drones detected movement in the convoy, they immediately carried out a precise strike. Without careful preparation or sufficient security, cars were easily targeted. The explosions shattered the column, mercilessly disabling each one in turn. As a result, there was nothing left to salvage on that battlefield. The old BTR-80 was engulfed in flames, the Humvee was set on fire, the Stryker was destroyed, and the Porcupine was crushed. What began as a counterattack turned into a bitter lesson. In a conflict that is still ongoing, a large number of expensive vehicles and resources were used without any planning and meaninglessly, just to waste money and personnel. Another story comes from Sumy, a city that has been used as a battlefield very often. Amidst the shadows of debris and destruction, an armored vehicle made another attempt to survive. The Bradley fighting vehicle is a vehicle that has repeatedly experienced the harsh realities of war on the front lines. But this time, Bradley wasn't attacking. He was hiding, trying to keep his eyes on the enemy, silent and still, almost imperceptible. However, just like in many famous fairy tales, a small mistake can lead to disastrous consequences. Bradley's open top proved to be a catastrophic flaw due to its vulnerable angle. As soon as the target's location was determined, it was immediately locked on. The Northern Forces Group moved without much warning. Bradley was neutralized in a single, silent, and deadly moment when they sent a Lancet drone. Zala invented the Lancet drone, which Russian forces frequently use to destroy radar systems, tanks, howitzers, and other vital targets in Ukraine. However, it's a hard-to-believe fact that Ukraine doesn't seem to have taught the Ukrainian army a significant lesson yet. Defense Mirror claims this drone has undeniable benefits. It has a strike range of 40 kilometers and can fly for up to 60 minutes. Precise targeting is made possible by the Lancet's real-time video feed and electro-optical guidance system. Direct clashes with Russian forces are far more than NATO's armored vehicles can handle. Every hypothesis is subjected to the ultimate test on the real battlefield. Additionally, Russia has demonstrated its dominance in conventional warfare since the beginning of the conflict. Despite its limitations, Ukraine is trying to persevere with determination. They are trying to patch, fix, and adjust. However, careless repairs in the field of heavy weapons are not sufficient to save lives. And unfortunately, the result doesn't change. They are short-lived. However, weakness is not limited to inadequate active defense systems or thin armor. The problem is much more complex. Tanks are scarce for NATO. Simply put, there isn't enough to build a strong armored force. We continue to follow all developments on the front line for you. Near the village of Rubizhin in Kharkiv Oblast, another 2S-11 22mm self-propelled gun belonging to the armed forces of Ukraine was destroyed by the precision work of Russian FPV drone operators. Ukrainian troops attempted to evacuate the vehicle, but the damage was critical. Smoke was rising from the artillery mount before the VT-40 FPV drone fired its final shot. The final attack destroyed the artillery system. FVP UAV crews from the Russian 200 on 17th Ivanovsky Regiment continue operations in the Krasny Lyman district of Luhansk Oblast. After spotting Ukrainian armed forces soldiers hiding in a dilapidated building, the FPV UAV operators launched an attack and captured the moment the building collapsed and burst into flames. UAV operators from Russia's 215th Special Operations Battalion spotted a building in the Kherson region, a deployment point of the Ukrainian armed forces, and caused extensive damage as a result of attacks carried out with FPV UAVs. Russian aerospace forces continue to support ground troops on the front lines. An air defense system belonging to the 38th Separate Marine Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces was destroyed in Mirnorod by a FAB-1500 launched from a Russian jet. The smoke clearly illustrates the precision of the attack. In the Kharkiv region, precise strikes carried out with the Russian Armed Forces Kornet ATGM system destroyed Ukrainian Armed Forces equipment and vehicles, likely serving as supplies. Russian troops are constantly scanning the area with UAVs. Any identified Ukrainian elements are being destroyed using the most appropriate systems. Drone operators from the Russian 16th Special Forces Brigade continued the destruction of shelters and equipment of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Arubtsovsk and Krasnolymansk directions. We continue with footage of the destruction of ground robotic systems of the Ukrainian armed forces. Forces of the Russian Western Group are conducting a special operation codenamed derobotization, aimed at completely suppressing and eliminating ground robotic systems belonging to Ukrainian forces along the front line in the Donbass region. The operations demonstrate that these intelligent systems used by Ukraine cannot escape the sensitive work of Russian troops. Official channels have reported that the number of destroyed robots has reached 109. Russian FPV drone operators detected and destroyed another M113 armored personnel carrier belonging to the Ukrainian armed forces on the Zaporizhia line, which was en route to its mission area. Buryat UAV operators from the Russian armed forces detected and destroyed a Ukrainian Baba Yaga heavy unmanned aerial vehicle near the Dobropilya line, thus maintaining Russian troops' dominance in the skies. In the Seversk direction, drone operators from the 3rd Army of the Russian Armed Forces maintain their dominance both on the ground and in the air. FPV drones are constantly destroying Ukrainian soldiers, their equipment, and their bunkers. Seversk is now under Russian control, and Ukrainian troops are in a state of panic. Zelensky is counting his losses but constantly trying to replace them. The heavy losses suffered by the Ukrainian armed forces in the vast expanses of Donbass have been captured on camera by Ukrainian soldiers. Armored vehicles destroyed by Russian FPV drones lie unusable as piles of wreckage on the side of the road. A TOS-1A Solntsepiok crew from the Russian Center Group of Forces launched a salvo of 220mm rocket rounds at bunkers and positions identified as belonging to the Ukrainian armed forces in the Krasnoarmeysk direction. Accurate strikes based on coordinates provided by reconnaissance drones destroyed the bunkers. A Grad MLRS crew consisting of paratroopers from the Russian Dnipro Group of Forces destroyed a Ukrainian armed forces drone control point in the Orekov district of Zaporizhia. missile artillery from the Russian Vostok group of forces destroyed a Ukrainian armed forces deployment shelter in the Dnepropetrovsk district with precision fire. Coordinated operations involving artillery systems and reconnaissance drones belonging to the Russian armed forces are continuing at full speed in the Kharkiv direction. Following coordinates received, the crews of the MSTOL-B towed howitzer of a motorized rifle regiment affiliated with the Russian group of forces destroyed temporary deployment areas of Ukrainian armed forces troops in the Kharkiv direction. Russian armed forces have taken control of Krasnoarmeysk. Soldiers from the Russian Center Group of Forces hoist the Russian Federation national flag in Shibankov Square, opposite the Donetsk National Technical University. Industrial Institute in Krasnoarmeysk, Donetsk People's Republic. We continue with footage of Ukrainian soldiers inside their vehicles. Russian FPV drone operators carried out a precision attack on a Ukrainian armored vehicle on the Pokrovsk line. During a Ukrainian infantry rotation, a Russian drone struck a Ukrainian armored vehicle right next to its gate, severely damaging the vehicle and injuring Ukrainian soldiers who were forced to evacuate. Russian unmanned aerial vehicle UAV operators have significantly reduced Ukrainian UAV activity in the Hulyapol region, making it difficult for Ukraine to use heavy UAVs in this sector of the front. This all depends on the speed of operations and the number of UAVs deployed. It takes 10 to 15 minutes for a Ukrainian heavy UAV to be detected and destroyed by Russian FPVs. Overall, reports from the Hulyapol region indicate that Russian troops continued to strengthen their positions on the northeastern outskirts of the city. Russian FPV drone operators destroyed another Ukrainian armed forces vehicle en route to its mission area near Lyman. A Tornado S attack by the Russian armed forces on the air defense center of the Ukrainian armed forces in Kharkiv Oblast caused heavy damage to the defense center and Ukrainian soldiers. Thanks for watching. We hope to see you again in future videos.